Welcome to the True North Compliance Podcast, where we discuss regulatory and compliance issues for Canadian business.
Hello, I'm Shawn O'Hara, and thanks for listening. Welcome, everybody. My guest today is Jeffrey Denissen. He is the owner of Profit Guard Consulting here in Victoria, BC. He offers expert on-demand CFO, which is Chief Financial Officer, and business advisory services to small and medium-sized businesses. With over 20 years of senior management experience, he helps business owners streamline financial processes, reporting, and drive growth and profitability. Jeffrey is also director on the board of the West Shore Chamber of Commerce, Think Local First, and the WorkLink Employment Society. And he does this to support and strengthen the local business community. His mission is to empower business owners with clear strategies and actionable insights for sustainable success. Welcome, Jeffrey. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Shawn, for having me.
Tell me about Profit Guard. What do you do?
So I set up Profit Guard basically as my second enterprise after I had an accounting firm. I quickly found out I don't like accounting, but I do like advising. I do like CFO work, forward-looking advice. So that's why I set up Profit Guard to help entrepreneurs to fill the gap between the accountant and their finances. Going forward, how do I make the right decision when I work in my company? And I saw when I was looking around in the local business community, I noticed they were not applying the principles that the big corporations apply. And I thought I can fill that gap. And that's why I've set up my CFO service so that I can help them drive their company forward with the same principles as the big corporations.
That's neat.
And I think so. And if I listen to my clients, there is a real need for that. It really drives things forward, not by big changes, but just by tweaking things. They have completely different results. And by applying the principles that the big corporations have, like utilizing all the data, looking forward and predicting your forecasts for every driver of your company, people are able to thrive and hit the goals that they set for themselves. And they find a way through my system to achieve the targets that they have. Because now it's the same principle as how do you eat an elephant, step by step. And that's what I teach them with my system. Set big goals and get there with small steps by peeling down your financials, chopping it up in small pieces, and work on each piece every time you look at it. That's basically what I'm doing. Same principle. How do you eat an elephant? By step. And that's how you reach the big goals for companies too.
Great. That covers a lot of the first questions there. We'll get into number 5 because I think you kind of covered 4 there, didn't you? Your core values. Yeah. Or do you want to?
Yep. I'll
do number 5 and then 6. What motivates you to improve your part of the world, like this community you're so heavily involved? What's your motivation?
Well, basically my clients are my motivation. I start working with them. All of them have more or less a crisis. That's why they hire me. They have a negative equity. They have a loss for a number of years. And this is the last attempt to move things forward because they can't get a loan. They see that they can't get investors because there's negative cash flow. And by working with them, I see their attitude change because I can see the hope growing. I have one clear example where they were working 60 hours a week. They got every bit and still they were making a loss. So you can imagine what that does for a person if you do that day in, day out. There's no positive result. And then somebody comes along, tweaks a little bit, shows them a few changes in their estimates, in their administration, how to look at things when they do a quote and when they record the expenses for the project. And all of a sudden they have a profit. So I was able to turn them around in 6 months' time from a huge loss to a big profit. And you should have seen the attitude and the trust and, well, the whole approach of everything. All of a sudden they got hopeful again from we have this company for a reason. We're getting there. We can achieve the goals. And that is for me the most rewarding, to see that change, see that hope, and then also having that meeting every week, talk about the struggles, and then you leave the meeting and they have a plan to attack those struggles. I found it the most rewarding thing there is. It's really fun.
That's neat. That's a great motivator too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And you have a bunch of letters after your name, CPA, CA, CIA. I don't know if that means you spent time with the CIA, IROC, and so on. Can you know what those What do they mean, basically, for people who are just not familiar with them?
Yeah. So when I came to Canada, I used to be a Dutch chartered professional accountant, and I translated that. I had to retake the whole exam, like most immigrants, you have to retake your whole exam. And the title that it gave me was Chartered Professional Accountant. Then I have a comma, and it says Chartered Accountant, because we used to have three types of accountants in Canada. And then the Chartered Accountant is the version that I had in the Netherlands, basically meaning that you do financials, but also internal controls and tax. So that is basically the area where I'm educated. Then the second title, which is CIA, stands for Certified Internal Auditor. That's a title you can use in the big corporations. And that's basically about procedures, internal controls, segregation of duties, and efficiency of processes. So that's what I also use in my current job. Although most people don't ask for this title, the big corporations do, because there's a worldwide institute governing everything internal auditors do, and they hand out this title. So it's a US-based institute, and they have excellent training if you want to know more about internal controls, efficiency, and those kind of things. So that's why I have that second title, and that's why I still utilize it. And for those who are interested in this, the Institute of Internal Auditors.org, that gives more information about that title.
Internal auditor, and the auditor makes it sound as scary as the CIA that most people know. Go in and find things.
I think we have the same, yeah. I think every now and then, if people don't know what an internal auditor does, it indeed scares people, because often when I came into the departments with new managers that had no idea what the internal auditor was doing, we got the same hostile environment because they didn't know. And it's a pity, because the internal auditor really helps management to improve things, to uncover hidden risks and move things forward. You can utilize that. Every support company in a corporation, if you utilize it properly, your life gets better as a manager. So, but it has the same impression at first, I would say. So that's a good comparison, where people don't like to work with them. But at the end of the day, everybody is safer, and we're working on a better world. So just like that.
That is a good comparison. So that's bringing the big business skills to the smaller businesses then.
Exactly, because the big corporations have the budgets for internal auditors, where the small companies, well, you and I know everything about that. There's one business owner, and he is holding all the pens of all the departments in the company because there's just one person. So bringing that to the table as well can bring also a number of quick fixes, because applying the same principles, if you're expanding your company, if you're growing your company, and keeping that segregation of duties, helps the business forward. So the example that I often use is, so for example, garden landscaping companies, they hire a foreman. That foreman basically does the same as the owner. So the risk is there that foreman takes all the business and leaves. In construction, you see the same principle. But there are ways to splitting it that is not going to happen, and the foreman is still happy. And that risk of having your business taken over by somebody you hired can be an opportunity. By splitting it the right ways, making sure that you segregate things as they should be, and that everybody is focusing on his own task. That way, you can prevent those kind of risks or fears, and you can be confident that everybody is doing what they should be doing, and you have even KPIs for that.
Is that something you help with?
Yeah. And I advise on, because sharing all the information in your company, that's great. Transparency is great, but it can also upset people because they get other ideas, they're not staying in their lane, and they get confusion. Who is responsible for what? Well, the owner is responsible for the whole company, and the foreman is just responsible for one part of it. So you shouldn't intermingle that, and you should keep it clean. Also for all kinds of reasons, but also to keep the peace within the company, to have that really clean and clear. From this is your role, this is my role, I take care of this, you take care of that. And as soon as there is confusion about who is responsible for what, confusion and even worse, conflicts start about that. And before you know it, like somebody said earlier this week to us, people are there where conflict is, or something like that, in that same lines. And that's what you see then too, that conflict arises when there's unclarity about roles and responsibilities. So right from the start, if you want to grow your company, have the end goal in sight and then split it up like that. so that you can focus on the growth instead of conflict management. So that's something I advise on. It's a small part, but an important part.
That seems a lot like real delegating, I guess, leadership, not abdicating, because that will happen in a company. The owner will delegate or think it's delegating and it's abdicating. Here, you do all this. I don't want to have, and they don't say, I don't want to have anything to do with it, or sometimes they do. And then they end up giving more and more, but that person, the person they delegate to, things, but not quite the way that it should be done. And then the owner gets annoyed or frustrated or realizes there's a real mess going on here.
Yeah, and then they start micromanaging, which you didn't want in the first place because you hired somebody to do a task. So clarity is everything in those kind of cases.
And that's where we get to, it's easier to do it myself, or I guess I would almost call them former business owners, the people who say, yeah, I used to have a big company, or I used to have so many people, and now it's down to me and one or two others. Probably because they went that route. They gave up trying to deal with a big team and went to the small, simple process for them.
Yeah, and they're back on the tools. That's something I hear quite often, that they are going back to the tools because management is a different task. It's different. It's a different mindset than building your own company and doing everything yourself. So if you want to grow, you have to make that step and really outsource and have that clear goal in mind. What do I want to achieve with those people? What kind of tasks do they have? You have to be very clear also for yourself. And I know it's difficult. So that's why I work with somebody else on HR and on recruitment, because things are not the same as when I started working, but you have to work with it. So you have to be flexible on those parts and see what's going on and how can you keep your staff happy, have the expectations clear for everybody involved to make it an awesome journey for everybody.
That's where the E-myth comes from, and I forget the term Michael Gerber uses, but the concept, so many people they go into business because they're doing a task and they think, do it better than the boss. I want more freedom, I want something. So they start their business so they can do task, and then it starts to grow, and then they end up in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great book, E-myth. There are a few, and I must say I agree completely with that. And that's where you see that they are a technician and they own a job, but they're not a business owner. So from that perspective, that's a different mindset. Having a job, so that is a deliberate choice, I would say, you make. If you want to be alone, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to grow your business, that's a different mindset. Then you don't have to own that job, but you have to start thinking as an entrepreneur, thinking opportunities and outsource things, because you need that time to lay back and think, is it the right direction? How do we get there? Instead of doing everything yourself. You don't have time. If you're on the tools, you don't have time to do marketing. You don't have time to develop. You don't have time to mentor people in the office. So it's a choice that you have to make, and an investment and a risk, of course.
That's what it is. A lot of this is a risk. Running a business everything is a risk too. There's people who've been in company thinking, okay, I can work here and then things can change. The company can go under, be sold. Even government can have its shaky episodes.
Yeah, I've been there where I thought this is my ideal job. 2 weeks in, didn't like it at all. So that's why I started my own company, to make it work.
Yeah, that's great. But getting back to those certifications too, are they mandated or voluntary? Because some like CPA, or maybe the better question is, can somebody do what you do without the actually training and the certifications? Is there any body that goes in? If I was to say, hey, I'm a CFO, hire me. Is there anybody any group, like a government group, a regulatory group anywhere that comes after me?
No, there is no regulated group unless you want to work in certain industries. Then the certification is often, IROC is an example, investment industry, where as a CFO, you need that certification. I have that certification, but other industries, for small businesses, for example, you see a lot of business consultants, the same type of work, at least on the surface. But by hiring somebody with a CPA designation, you are certain that they really understand the whole process, including cash flow. So I've seen a couple of examples, even here in downtown Victoria, where they were working with a consultant, but the consultant was only focusing on revenue and not on cash flow. And if you look at the statistics regarding the survival rate of companies with multiple employees, then you see that if we would start a company today and we start with 10 companies, in the next 5 years, 3 of us will not be there anymore. And if you look further down the road, 18 years, only 3 will survive. And the main reason of that is cash flow, cash. If those companies would have had a loan, have an investor, funding, or would just have taken care of their cash flow, they would still be around. I'm pretty sure. That's the main reason companies go bankrupt, because there is no cash. Nobody wants to fund it. Look at the startups. We had that Fisker example in California. They were there for a couple of months, and then it became clear again that the loans were bigger than their revenue. So yeah, that's a lost case. Then they go bankrupt again. And it would be preventable if they would have had a proper CFO doing the forecasting and taking measures if you see that gap coming, if there is not enough cash. Then you can manage that. Or we slow down with production, or we take other choices to fill that gap temporarily, and we can see light at the end of the tunnel again because you're forecasting properly. So no, there is no required designation to do CFO work. But if you're hiring a CFO, I would strongly recommend somebody with a CPA background or any other certification in the field for that specific industry.
Since you are certified, is there a way that you can use that in, say, to your advantage in your marketing? Or is there a way you use that to separate you from other people claiming?
Yes, especially when it comes to confidentiality of data, because people don't like to share their numbers. I have the same requirements and liabilities as any other CPA. So that already gives a little bit more security for people that work with me, that there is an overarching institute that takes care of the quality that I provide. The other thing is it gives so much more knowledge and insight in the financials, my background, that I can quickly get up to speed, because that is my background. Get into a company, make yourself completely familiar with what's happening by looking at the financials, do your things that need to happen, so audit, review, or compilation, and then move on. So that is a real advantage when doing this kind of work. I just can read the numbers and I can see what's going on. And then based on that, you ask the pointed questions. What about this? And we can start solving things. But if you don't have that background of reading a lot of data, a lot of financials, and that's what I see with my clients, it's tough because there is a lot of data, but you need to know where to look and what drives that data. Because if you don't do that, you can keep looking forever, but you still don't see the problem. There's too much data and people don't recognize the patterns. There are a few techniques that accountants have where they compare data in a certain way and you can see the trends. But you have to know how to compare the data, what to group, what to do with those kind of things. And that comes natural after a couple of years working in accountancy. So yes, I would say it's a huge advantage to move things forward, because consulting is one and mentioning the right things to do, but making that link with the actual financial data of the company is a different thing. Making the connection between a number and a process, that's a different thing. So that's where my CIA title, Certified Internal Auditor title, comes from. And that helps me enormously with, okay, this is the topic, this is the number the next year is the following, what is the process and where is the process broken that delivers this number. So yeah, that helps a lot with explaining and seeing those things going forward.
Your first step in just trying to get a new client then is educating why you are different and better than others without that training.
Yeah, the first conversation is about what's your issue, and then my solution to it, what I do to help them out. And often they see that is exactly the gap within their company. They are very good at the processes. They're very good at the operational part of the business, but making the link with the financial decisions is another item. And that's where I bring that knowledge to fill that gap for the business owner, to make that link between the strategy they have, the vision that they have, and then the operations they have to get there, but they're then missing the part of, but this is the impact on the financials if you do this, this, and this. And having that conversation is really rewarding, where you have talking about what is the plan for the next few weeks, what are you doing from an operational perspective? Okay, that means the following for your financials. And that is always very insightful for both of us, because it's a conversation, it's a teamwork. I want to achieve this. The financials are doing this. Is this the way we want to go, or do we want to tweak the process to change the financials?
So what state should a company be in, or what would a business owner be looking at when they realize they're in a situation and you can help them?
Basically, all processes. So from startup to scaling to optimizing to selling, I work with all the phases because every phase has its own challenge. The only thing I don't work with is with startups that don't have enough funds, because then it's really difficult. If they are, there's a term for that. If they are doing everything themselves, try to fund everything themselves, then things are going slow. But if they have the funds and they have a clear vision and business plan, I can help them to get there, help them scale. I like that process. Another process I also like, established businesses. They know they can optimize, they can get better results, but they don't know how. That's another phase that I really enjoy, by looking at, okay, we have the expenses, but do they bring a return on investment? Yes or no? And answering that question for the owners and giving that view from, okay, the expense you're doing here it's fun, but it's not bringing your company anything. Same with marketing. I look at those kind of things where if you spend money on marketing, eventually there should be a result, I hope. If that's not the case, we should do something about it to make that work. Then something is not right. And you see that often with companies in the optimizing phase, where they are not monitoring the right KPIs to get the maximum result for the company.
So a business owner who wakes up at 3 a.m, stressed, the thought going through their mind where they would realize, oh, I've got to hire Jeffrey. What are the fears and the stresses?
What I often see, and I have clients calling me in the morning or sending me an email, can we talk today? It's often about uncertainty of, for example, hiring people or not getting enough revenue, and there's a root cause for that. And they want to talk about what should we do about this? What is the impact if I do this, this, and this? And then I always set up that meeting and I can show them, if you do this, this will be the result in the forecast. If you do this, that will be the result in the forecast. And that gives them peace of mind. That gives them confidence to follow through with that decision. Because it's often that people start thinking about, especially if you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's all the what ifs that you're running in your head, but you don't have the final answer. And I give that final answer. If you do this, this is the result. If you do that, that will be the result. And that gives the confidence to make that decision or not, leave it as it is. But then they know this will be the impact for the bottom line, for the gross profit, or for the expenses and the return on investment on that. It answers all those questions.
You're like a stress reliever.
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
There's a marketing message in there.
Yeah, for sure. Didn't think about it that way, but you can say it like that, yes.
You mentioned earlier about the business failures, how few companies are left after 18 years, which when I first heard that stat, I was quite surprised by. I think it's kind of hidden that people will say, oh, I sold my business, but they often, and you I think know the numbers better than me, it's often that didn't sell not for the price that they wanted, but they didn't sell for a reasonable price. And they sell because, in a sense, they've lost that control, or they're going bankrupt, or they're going off the cliff. So they're selling while they still have something, and then they're getting out. So I know people say, yeah, I sold my business, but it's not necessarily a happy time for them. It sort of counts as somewhat of a failure of a business.
Yes, I agree. I've seen that. I've worked with some people that sold businesses for business owners. And every time I looked at the numbers, because they asked me to look at the numbers for the next buyer, I was stunned to see what they were selling, because it was not a good number. The cash flow was low, and that is a huge factor in the price of the company. And then you're asking the owner, why are you selling? It's for all the bad reasons. It's, I'm tired of this, can't handle it anymore, health, those kind of issues. They were not ready to sell. So I often had that conversation. If you wait a year and we improve the numbers, is that an option? And then it's not an option, because they are so tired of the business. It's not working for them. It's not giving them the income. They have to replace the company by a job to make the money that they actually need. And I think that's a really sad situation, but that's what you often see. And then on the other hand, they are also lucky to sell their company, because the number is 20% of all companies that are for sale are actually being sold. So imagine that 20%, 1 out of 5. That's not a good number. Most businesses just close their doors. They just lock the door behind them and they walk out with a huge loss. And that's where I think that shouldn't be the case. If you would have invested in somebody that can help you increase that cash flow, you would have had a profit. But yes, like with everything, you have to make an expensive cost at first before you see results. And that's the same here. If you would have known your numbers, if you would have invested in your accounting, in your systems, and having the right consultant helping you with the numbers, you would increase that chance of selling your company quite a bit. Yep.
Fascinating. And even the difference with people who sell and hang on, it's because who get this deal where they've got to stay with the company. It's because they are still too tied to the company. So it kind of becomes a job for usually 1 to 3 years, I've seen. But the people who can sell and walk away completely, they've got the money and they've set up the company so that it is not key to them. The new owners can come in and take over. And often the new owner is not somebody from the company who's just there to work. Now, instead of having a job, is now the owner has bought their job. It's somebody like an outside company who's come in and taken it over.
Yep. And what you often see nowadays, and I think the Canadian government is gearing up on that, is that the employees buy the company. But then they have to be careful that they don't buy another job, but they are going to be an entrepreneur, a business owner who grows the business and sees opportunities instead of just filling the 40 hours a week. And that's a big difference. That's a different mindset. But there's an opportunity for employees to buy the companies. I think the Canadian government is setting up all the things that make that possible. So that's a good thing, but also a risk for those people doing that. So again, they should invest in the right things, like marketing, like HR, and CFO services to grow their business and not just keep it running for the sake of keeping it running and keeping busy during the week. That shouldn't be the goal.
It certainly is helpful for the community when the staff buys it, because then it stays local. It's not taken over by a large, perhaps multinational corporation. So it stays local.
Plus, it will be sustainable. I don't mean green, but sustainable in the sense of will it exist in the next 50 years? And I think that's only helpful. And if you look at the big investors, they are for the short-term gains. And having it employee-owned will make things so much more sustainable and future-proof and creating opportunities for the next generations. I think that's the way to go. I really enjoyed that part where you see that things are sustainable and not for a short-term gain. And people are not interested in the next 5 years, but in the next 2 years. I think that's always a bad situation when people are there for the short-term gains, fill their pockets and walk out. It should be sustainable.
One more question. Many of our listeners feel overwhelmed by red tape and the shifting compliance requirements. Do you have any real-world examples where you've helped with compliance that they could actually use that as a competitive advantage or for new opportunities? Like, do you deal with compliance issues and so on with a company?
Yes and no. Compliance, it really depends. It's a tough question. Compliance is always a headache, but yes, you can use it to your advantage if you look at the objective of the compliance item. For example, if you look at your wages, there are certain requirements there. If you do it properly and implement it, it will save you a lot of headaches. So from that perspective, it's good to take care of the compliance requirements. But if you do a step back and think about why is that legislation there, and you translate it into what is the vision of my company. A good example is those people here in Victoria that want to do the honest wages. There's a term for that. And want to pay their people such that they can have a good living. That is an example of, yes, there's a minimum. We do that. That's the compliance part. But we also step up because we support those people and I want to have them for a very long term in my company. And that's where you then look at the compliance, what is required, and how can I make that even better for my company and align it with the goals that my company has. So that is something, that's a discussion, a financial discussion, where you have to look at your budget, make the numbers work, and then you can support that goal and go beyond what is required from a compliance perspective. And that brings you prosperity for your employees, but it also drives your company because you don't have to rehire people on a regular basis because they walk out for the next $2 at the competition. So it's a way to make things better, in my view, if you approach it from that perspective. Just think back, what is the goal? How can we do it better as a company?
And the living wage and all of that gives them a huge degree of stability, especially if it's a service business where they're going into people's homes. That ideally keeps them all honest and trustworthy because they realize they've got a lot to lose. They haven't just been hired at this job and they figure they'll be in another job next month.
Exactly. They have an interest in make it sustainable and support your company in the best way they can. And that's a clear example. The living wages, that's the term indeed, to help your staff, but also help yourself by making sure that you don't have to rehire every 2 years, because that is way more expensive than keeping your staff happy during the year.
And the customers and the clients who favor that will really like that or would appreciate that, which is also great.
Yeah. Win-win.
I know sometimes you put on webinars and that the podcast can be timeless and people will hopefully be listening to this for years to come, or at least this recording. How can people find out, or where can they go to check about any upcoming events or webinars or talks that you have?
I have a website, www.profitguardconsulting.com, and there's an events page where I announce all my webinars that are coming or seminars. And I must admit, summer is coming, so it looks a little bit empty now. But for September, later in the year, and I try to do that every year in September, I announce my webinars and trainings going forward. So they will find it there on my website. And the second one is LinkedIn. That's where I also try to announce all my events.
Great. Thank you. I will put that into the show notes.
Thank you, Shawn. Highly appreciate it. If you have questions, send me an email at jeffrey@profitguardconsulting.com. Happy to engage.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me. That was a real pleasure. And I'm looking forward to the publication of your podcast, and I'll make sure to put it on my phone and listen to it in the car.
All right. Thank you. And that's a wrap.